All right, so Met class number 5. So we're basically going to go over tools and like, I mean, we've technically went over the different tools that we will be using, but we've not really shown you guys like what they kind of look like or how to use them. So basically in this lesson, we're just going to go over like a bunch of videos that will give you a more like visual representation of what we'll be doing in Mac class. So the miter saw hopefully does not lag out too much. And tell me if you guys could hear it. Okay, cool.
First, check to make sure that the miter saw is unplugged. Then, check the waste bag. If it is full, safely dispose of waste in the trash. Next, measure and mark a line on the material along the path you'd like to cut. Place the marked line in the path of the saw blade. Then, lower the blade to make sure everything is properly aligned. Clamp the material to the saw using squeeze clamps, making sure that they don't interfere with the blade. Plug the miter saw in. Pressing the safety down with the palm of your hand, make sure your hands are clear. Then pull the trigger with your index finger and slowly lower the blade through the material. When finished, do not touch the blade or the material since they will be hot. Unplug the miter saw when finished. If needed, use something to support the material you're cutting, like wings. First things first, unplug the miter saw. To create a crosscut, loosen the miter lock handle, then depress the miter lock plate. Next, turn the table to your desired angle, and then retighten the miter lock handle. To make a bevel cut, loosen the bevel lock knob, move the saw arm to your desired angle, retighten the bevel lock knob, and now you're ready to cut. The last special cut you can create is the compound miter cut. This combines both a crosscut and a bevel cut. First, set the crosscut angle. Next, set the angle for your bevel cut. Lastly, plug in the miter saw and proceed as normal.
Okay, so that was okay. That might have been a bit too fast, but essentially, miter saws, we use the miter saw the most because it's the most like it can make the most simple cut, like just a straight cut. Whenever we're building game pieces, we use the miter saw a lot because it's like just lots of 2x4s and like really big pieces of wood that we just need to cut down to size. Um, and then the miter saw is when we use it in our robot. Um, Usually when we're cutting sheet metal, we won't use this because this is just this. We use the miter saw to cut like uh, in width. It would be smaller pieces of wood that we're trying to cut with the miter saw, and it's like an easy and quick just chop. Wait, Ishan, can you click that?
So do you guys have any like questions on the miter saw? If not, then I could just like continue on. You
Oh,
can keep
also, I
thinking.
think this is something
Mhm.
that newbies might want to know for the miter saw. Whenever you actually cut something, it destroys a tiny little bit of the material. So if you want like an accurate cut, you're gonna want to like position the blade to be the one side of the line on the side that you're
Yeah.
not gonna be using.
That is true. So I mean, I'm not sure if you guys actually like noticed. Okay, there we go. So like when, here, one second. Give me one sec. I'll bring it right up. Not this video. Okay. Okay, so basically what, just to say more in depth of what Cooper was saying is like, you see where the line is and where the miter saw is cutting. So when the miter saw actually cuts through this wood, it'll kind of shave off a very thin piece of wood. So it's like basically what the blade diameter is that's how much is going to shave off your wood piece. So whenever you're making a, sorry, the blade width, I'm not sure. I think I said blade
Blade
diameter, but I
diameter
meant
would be a
blade width.
bit larger than
Yeah.
that.
Blade width, sorry. Yeah. So when you're measuring for a piece, for instance, in this wood piece, if you want it to be like, for instance, a foot of wood piece, then you're gonna measure a foot, and either you're gonna align your blade so that the side that is going to take off a part of the wood will be to the left side of your measurement, and you would have your foot of wood on your right side. Have like one part is going to be your waste material, and the rest of the piece that is going to be remaining after the cut is going to be the piece that you'll actually use.
All
Cool.
right, wait, I have a
Now-
quick question.
Mhm.
So I can, so essentially a piece of the wood is going to get vaporized somehow. It's going to get like, absolutely shredded. And that's where that discrepancy comes from. Where exactly do those shavings go? Are they just released or are they captured by the
It's the
machine?
sawdust that it goes into the bag.
So yeah, so basically how a blade looks like, it's kind of like notches that will be spinning really fast and kind of taking away some of that wood. That's why you have that kind of sawdust or that piece of that section of wood that comes off. And where that goes is in the miter saw, there's normally a bag at the back of the miter saw that would collect majority of. Otherwise, there will be some dust like around the area. So afterwards, you want to make sure to vacuum it up.
Yeah, so that's
Okay,
why
cool.
whenever we use the miter saw, like after we're done for the day, we always have to vacuum like the miter saw parts and the ground surrounding it.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Okay. For riveting, in this riveting video, they kind of show you with the hand riveter. It takes a lot of effort and it's kind of painful, but thankfully near the end of our last year, we kind of got this add-on drill piece for riveting. So you just add it to the drill as a drill bit, but it's kind of like an extended handle. And that makes it more like automatic rather than having to do manual work to rivet a rivet in. But this is just for you to understand how a rivet works.
The rivet in With the rivet in place, slide the rivet gun over the thin side of the rivet. Squeeze the rivet gun hard. You might need to do this a few times. Squeeze the rivet gun until you hear a loud pop. Then bend the rivet gun to break off waste and throw the waste away. Latch the rivet gun back up when finished.
Okay, so I just want to explain a little bit more about what rivets are used for. So usually rivets are used to clamp two surfaces together. So last year we used the rivet gun quite extensively for our elevator, and we were basically clamping like multiple pieces of like metal sheet, and we needed the rivet gun for that. Oh, we also used it in our shooter mechanism. Um, so it's really useful. It's supposed to be like a quick, simple fix to like join two pieces of metal or any two thin sheets together. But we ran into some problems using this rivet gun because it's so difficult, and like you'll get like blisters on your hand, and it hurts quite a bit after a while. That's why we had, like Ishan mentioned, we had got a rivet gun. Um,
Another fun story from last year was like a hand rivet tool. Like we would have like what about 40 rivets to do, and it would be like Cassidy, me, and Run that would be like sitting down there and then just seeing how many in a row we could do before we like gave up. So that way we were able to effectively constantly rotate and finish all the rivets in like 2 hours.
Yeah, that
But
video gave me
yeah,
dramatic flashbacks.
that was painful. All right, so now we're going to be going over the drill press. The drill press is mainly used for creating precise holes. In both our miter saw and our drill press, we have a laser that would help you direct where exactly and how the precise location which you want to drill or cut.
Welcome.
yeah, I wanted to mention before we start the video that the laser pointer for our drill press, it isn't that accurate. Like it's always like a little bit off, so we end up never using it. And so what you would do is okay, you might use it. Okay, so first what you do is you estimate either using the laser or just using your judgment uh, where exactly you want to place the material on the drill press. And then we would actually pull the the drill bit down to make sure that it's like accurate. Yeah.
To a tutorial on how to safely use a drill. Welcome to a tutorial on how to safely use a drill press. Drill presses are best used when making holes in pieces of metal and allows for a much more precise and clean cut. Before we begin, make sure that your part has been prepared correctly and that the machine that you intend to use is in good condition. To start, select the correct size drill bit and fasten it into the chuck using the chuck key. It is crucial that you make sure the key is removed from the chuck before you start drilling. Now fasten your piece and some scrap material in place by using a clamp or a vise. The drill table may need to be adjusted based on the height of the piece. Make sure that after adjusting the table, it is securely fastened to prevent wobbling while drilling. Depending on the type of material, you may need to change the drill speed, in which case you should ask a mentor for help. Now that everything is set up, you can begin drilling. Turn on the light and drill, and slowly move the bit through the piece. When working with a thick piece of metal, make sure to apply drilling oil and drill in short bursts to give time for the bit to cool. As you reach the end of the cut, ease up on the pressure to prevent the drill from hitting the table. Once you have broken through, do not turn off the machine until the bit has been fully retracted. Congratulations! You just learned how to safely use the drill press.
Yeah, I want to mention it's kind of difficult teaching this online, but when we get back in person, we can show you, like it's much easier to show you like exactly how you would go through step by step and how you would feel the drill press when you're pulling it down and then when to release it, and those kind of like smaller details. But saying that, do you guys have any questions about the drill press or the rivet gun? I don't think we asked if you guys had any questions for that. Okay, then, if you guys don't have any, if you guys do not have any questions, Ishan, you can just go on with the bandsaw.
Cool. I just want to point out for the bandsaw, in this video, like when I was searching for the videos, I couldn't find one for the FRC, kind of how to use a bandsaw. So this video, they're kind of showing professionals who use their bare hands and they do not use a push block. So what you need to use when you're using a bandsaw is a push block. What a push block is, it's basically like either a waste block that you use behind the tool that you're using in order to push that so you don't get your fingers in the way of the blade. It's very necessary for safety of your fingers. Another thing to note is that in our workspace, for safety wise, we do not wear any gloves, because what could happen with gloves and any of these drilling mechanisms is that the glove can get caught up in the blade and therefore pull your hand in. So it's another safety issue. It's kind of like ironic that gloves are supposed to protect your hands, but in this case, it would not.
Having a bandsaw in your shop adds a lot of different cutting capabilities to your arsenal. And you know, the table saw gives you right angle cuts. The bandsaw can add curved cuts as well as resawing and even safer ripping than you can do on a table saw. But let's basically, the bandsaw is just what it sounds like. It's a big, these two wheels. And so it's spinning around. The blade is working down into the table. All the cutting happens down into the table, making it very safe. There's no possibility of kickback as there is on a table saw. There are a couple of settings you need to have set up before you can use the bandsaw. For instance, you have to have proper tension on the blade. And you also have to set these guide bearings so that they control the lateral and side to side, or the lateral and backward movement of the blade. So once those are set up, and that's different on every machine, then you're ready to saw. One of the main things you do have to adjust before you make any cut, though, is the height of the blade guard. So the blade guard can move up and down, and it covers or exposes a length of blade depending on how thick of a piece of wood you're cutting. So if we're cutting a piece such as this one, you'd want to get the blade all the way down as far as possible without making contact. You want these bearings to be able to freely move. Get it very close and then lock it in place. What this does is it will limit the amount of deflection that can happen, and so it gives you a better quality of cut. The accuracy will be much better. Plus it's safer, less blade exposed. There are a number of cuts you can make on the bandsaw, ranging from curved cuts to resawing, which is basically tall ripping of wood. And in order to do those various types of cuts, you have to decide beforehand what type of cut you're doing and which blade you're going to put on the saw. So if you're doing a curved cut of any kind, you're going to want to figure out the maximum radius that it has and find the right blade. Essentially, the thinner the blade that you put on, the narrower the blade, the tighter radius of a cut you can do. So if I'm doing very tight curves, I'll put on this 1/4 inch blade. If I'm doing resawing, which is cutting through the wood vertically like this, you're going to want a very wide blade. It's going to need to be as stable as possible. So at least 3/4 of an inch wide, possibly 1 inch wide to do that kind of work. Now for general cutting, I keep a 1/2 inch blade on the bandsaw all the time, just for doing general ripping and cross cutting and some light curved pieces. That works just fine. And so that's what I was going to show you just now, is how to just cut a curve in a piece of wood just by freehanding it. And if we were making a template out of this, one of the things I would do is cut slightly outside the line and then sand it down to make it perfect. But I'm just going to go ahead and make the cut just so you can see what it's like on the bandsaw. So whenever you start a cut, you don't want to be making contact with the saw when you turn it on, but I'll turn this on and then I'll slowly feed this into the blade and I'm going to try an eyeball and just follow this line by steering the wood from behind as you're pushing it through. It's pretty intuitive. All right, let's turn on the saw. Okay, pretty fast cut. Got my curved cut now. So if I wanted to use this for a template, I could bring it over to the sander and do some final shaping, getting rid of any little bumps, and then I'd be all set.
Any questions on the bands?
What would you use as a push block?
So for a push block, either it's like these store-bought push blocks, which are just like plastic kind of handheld items that you could just push, and they have like a flat edge on the other side. So they go really well for they're very easy to use to push the blocks. If you don't want to purchase that and it's just like an extra hassle, then you could just use what's it's called a waist block, like any block that has like right angled, perfect rectangle, maybe. And you would just basically use the waist block because you don't really care if that block gets cut, and it's better the block gets cut than your fingers. So you would use a waist block to push another block, as long as that waist block has a complete flat edge and you're using that to push the cut that you want to make, then you're fine.
Having said that, we do have a plastic push block, so usually we'll just use that. Yeah. After the presentation, Ishan, you can just pull up an image of it.
Yeah.
Today, an introduction to this guy, the Jigsaw. If you haven't already, grab your saw, grab some safety glasses, and I'll see you in the shop. So, the Jigsaw, also known as the Saber Saw, is a fantastic tool for the carpenter because it's great for cutting irregular shapes and curves. It's great for cutting notches in framing and lumber and decking, for making curved cuts in plywood, and it works really well for cutting circles. Now this jigsaw is similar to a circular saw in the way that it actually has a blade, it has a handle and a trigger, and it has an adjustable base plate. But the jigsaw has a straight blade, and unlike the circular saw blade, this blade cannot be adjusted for the depth of cut. Now the two most common types of jigsaws in the market for residential construction are the top grip, like mine here with a trigger, and the other type has a barrel grip that puts your hand behind the motor and behind the blade for more control. Both are a great option in my opinion. It just all depends on feel and your personal preference. But either way you go, be sure that you buy a jigsaw that accepts T-shank blades. Trust me on that. So with that, blade selection is really important. First, before you buy a blade, you need to ask yourself, what am I cutting and how do I want that cut to turn out? As I've heard me say that before. So for instance, if you're cutting framing lumber and you need that cut to be fast and not so clean, then choosing a blade with a lower TPI is what you're going to need. Now, on the flip side of that, if you're choosing to make a really clean cut, more precise cut, then choosing a blade with a higher TPI is what you're going to need. What is TPI? TPI stands for teeth per inch. Somewhere on the packaging, it'll note the teeth per inch. So this is a 3-pack, and you can see on the bottom that it shows that it came with a 20 and 2/14. Also at the top, it also has a little logo that it fits the T-shank, which is very important. And sometimes, some packaging not only shows the teeth per inch, but it also gives a description of what it's used for. And second, be sure to choose the right blade length. You need to make sure that the blade is at least an inch or really more than the depth of your material. And then third, I would buy blades that only cut on the upstroke. This represents really the majority of the blades out there, but you can buy blades that cut on the downstroke. Why is this important? Well, to answer that question, you first have to understand the cutting action of the jigsaw is up and down. When the blade is cutting on the upstroke, the base plate is being pulled in tight to the material. And then when the blade is cutting on the downstroke, it actually wants to lift the base plate off the workpiece, creating a better opportunity for kickback and injury. But as long as you use caution, these blades can be very, very beneficial. The other thing you need to understand is that when the blade is cutting on the upstroke, it creates tear out on the top side of the material, which could actually be your finished surface. And that's exactly why some people like to have blades that cut on the downstroke, because really the majority of the time when you're laying something out or drawing something, it's on the finished side of the wood. Let's move on and look at some of the features of this saw. First is a toolless blade release. This is super fast, very easy, and honestly, it's kind of fun. Next is the adjustable base plate, which then can be beveled to a 45-degree angle for making bevel cuts. And then third, the trigger is variable, meaning that the harder that you depress it, the faster the blade will go. This gives you a lot of control when making cuts. And lastly, the adjustment for the amount of reciprocation. What this means is set to 0 reciprocation, the blade tracks perfectly up and down. But with different levels of reciprocation added, the blade will actually travel more in an oval shape pattern, sort of lunging forward, which produces a more aggressive cut. This is an example with no reciprocation added. And this is an example with it turned all the way out. Speed and quality really are the two main things that are affected with these adjustments. All right, let's talk about 3 types of cuts to the circuit saw. First is a short straight cut, which is common for this saw because long cuts are not. So you can be used in finished carpentry and stone.
Video's paused, yeah? Frozen?
Yeah, I think they froze.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.